As the war in Ukraine continues, the sanctions imposed by the West have deterred Russia from its war effort, but they have clearly weakened the Russian economy. At one point, they resulted in a significant devaluation of the ruble. Russia responded with a counterattack. It put in place 3 financial countermeasures. First, it'll use rubles to repay Russia's foreign debt in dollars and euros. Second, it'll require non-friendly countries to use rubles to buy Russian oil and gas. And third, to peg the ruble to gold and have Russian banks buy gold directly and in large quantities from the treasury. If Russia enforces them, it will be a major escalation, as these measures will have an enormous impact on the current world financial system. It has been a month since Russia attacked Ukraine, and the sanctions imposed on Russia by Europe and the US have been escalating gradually. The US took the lead in booting some Russian banks out of SWIFT. It then made a big move that defied market expectations by freezing about half of the Russian central bank's foreign exchange and gold reserves. That is, about $300 billion of the Russian central bank's approximately $640 billion in gold and foreign exchange reserves were frozen, accounting for nearly half of Russia's total international reserves. Let's look at Russia's first counterattack, paying off Russia's dollar and euro foreign debt in rubles. The US and European governments have generally rejected this idea. Both parties have stressed that Russia would be considered in default and its credit rating would be affected if it doesn't pay the debts in dollars or euros. Let's look at the second measure. Russian President Vladimir Putin said on March 31st that from April 1st, companies from non-friendly countries should first open ruble accounts in Russian banks and then pay for the Russian gas through these accounts. If payment isn't made in rubles, the contract will be terminated. I've signed a decree today that sets the rules of the Russian natural gas trade with so-called unfriendly states. We are offering our contracting parties from such countries a clear and transparent arrangement. To buy Russian gas, they should open ruble accounts in Russian banks and pay for gas from these accounts, delivered starting from tomorrow, April 1st of this year. According to Russia, buyers of US dollars or euros must go to a designated Russian bank and convert them to rubles at the exchange rate of the day, and then pay for the gas in rubles. The designated bank isn't on the list of Western sanctions. Putin added, "If these payments aren't being accomplished, we would consider it as buyers' failure to meet their commitments with all the relevant consequences. Nobody sells anything to us for free. Neither are we going to do charity work. That means the current contracts would be brought to a halt." The EU called the move blackmail. Western companies and governments have said they reject any move to change gas supply contracts with a change in payment currency. Most European buyers use the euro. These company executives say renegotiating terms could take months or longer. Putin may be experimenting. It's hard to say if there are any later adjustments. The reality is that after the second measure was introduced, financial markets quickly responded. The Russian ruble quickly recovered against the dollar. Before the war, the ruble was trading at about 70 to 80 rubles to the dollar. After the war, on March 7th, the ruble fell to 173 rubles to the dollar, and on March 31st, 80 rubles to the dollar. It has effectively regained much of the ruble's lost ground since the sanctions. Europe relies heavily on Russia to meet its energy needs. About 40% of its natural gas comes from Russia, and a decision by Moscow to turn off the taps could trigger supply shortages, plant closures, and high energy costs across the region. So far, in 2022, Europe has spent between 200 million and 800 million euros, or $880 million a day on Russian gas. These sales have already significantly weakened the effect of the sanctions. Earlier, on March 28th, at a daily press conference in Moscow, when asked how Russia would respond to Europe's refusal to settle the cost of gas in rubles, the Russian presidential spokesman replied that the problem would be solved as soon as it arose, and stressed that Russia wouldn't provide gas to Europe for free. Therefore, it's not yet known whether the refusal of European countries will persist in the long term, or whether internal divisions will occur among the European members. At the same time, Russia is seeking support from Asian countries. China and India, 2 Asian powers, are among the few countries that haven't condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine at the end of February 2022. The Russian foreign minister has been meeting with Indian leaders in New Delhi since April 1st. Earlier, he also met with the Chinese foreign minister. If India and China join the camp of using the ruble, it may further strengthen the ruble's position. A month after the war, the US government discovered that India was taking advantage of low prices to import large quantities of Russian oil. India is the third largest importer and consumer of oil in the world. In the last month or so, India purchased at least 13 million barrels of Russian oil, compared to less than 16 million barrels for all of 2021. Because India's purchases will continue to increase, India is devising a mechanism to settle its trade with Russia, including through payments in Indian rupees. US officials have warned that a major increase in Indian oil imports from Russia could expose India to significant risk. When the Russian foreign minister visited India in early April, his goal was to win the support of India. Russia has long considered India a friend. The Russian foreign minister's visit came a day after senior officials from the US and Britain held talks in New Delhi to convince the Indian government to avoid undermining Western sanctions.
Our meeting today takes place in a difficult international environment, quite apart from the pandemic. India, as you are aware, has always been in favor of resolving differences and disputes through dialogue and diplomacy.
According to a Reuters report, Indian and Russian officials are expected to discuss a payment mechanism in Indian rupees against Russian rubles to maintain bilateral trade as sanctions make dollar-based transactions difficult.
Well, as regards using ruble and rupee in our financial trade dealings, I would recall that many years ago we started moving in our relations with India, with China, and with many other countries from using dollar and euros to more and more use of national currencies. Under these circumstances, this trend, I believe, will be intensified, which is natural and obvious. We will be ready to supply to India any goods which India wants to buy.
With no doubt, China is now an ally of Russia. China-Russia cooperation has no limits. There are no limits for both countries to strive for peace, safeguard security, and oppose hegemony. We are going through a serious stage in the history of international relations. I am convinced that following its results, the international situation will become much clearer, and together with you and with other like-minded people, we will move towards a multipolar, fair, and democratic world order. A noteworthy development at the moment is the relationship between China and Saudi Arabia. China is Saudi Arabia's largest trading partner. Beijing has been working on pulling Washington and Riyadh apart in key regions of the world. Originally, Beijing didn't have the strength because it couldn't protect Saudi Arabia's oil fields or the sea lanes that allow oil to reach global markets. At present, only the United States can deliver. But Saudi's discontent with the US has been on the rise since the days of former US President Barack Obama, who took Washington's priorities away from protecting the Middle East and oil supplies. Since 2015, Saudi Arabia has been locked in a standoff war with Yemen's Houthis. During his campaign, Biden promised to brand Saudi Arabia as a rogue state. After his presidency, he removed the Houthis from the list of terrorist organizations. Since late 2021, the Saudi military has been asking the US for more Patriot interceptor missiles, saying its inventory is approaching dangerous levels. The Patriots can shoot down missiles in the air to protect Saudi oil facilities from Iranian-backed Houthi attacks and shoot down missiles in the air. But the White House says other US allies have significant needs as well, and that a routine review will take time. The White House is also trying to revive the nuclear deal with Iran. So when Russian oil suddenly disappeared from the global market in March 2021, Biden turned to the Saudi crown prince, who rejected his request. A spokesman for a Saudi foreign ministry official said, "You criticize our oil production and call it dirty, yet when you are in trouble, you turn to us to increase production?" Recently, the Wall Street Journal published an article urging President Joe Biden to work to improve relations with Saudi Arabia. The article quoted a Saudi businessman as saying, The US-Saudi relationship is dead. Obama dug the grave, and Biden put the lid on the casket. By the way, one exception is former US President Donald Trump, whose visit to Saudi Arabia was met with an amazing royal embrace. In mid-March, the Wall Street Journal reported that Saudi Arabia was in talks with the Chinese government about converting some of its oil sales to China into renminbi denominations. This is heavyweight news. It's because the change from US dollar to renminbi is a deal that has been on and off for more than 6 years and has suddenly accelerated in the context of the Russian-Ukraine war. Previously, the Saudi government had concerns. Converting millions of barrels of oil traded daily from US dollars to RMB could disrupt Saudi Arabia's economy. RMB is strictly controlled by the Chinese Communist government, isn't freely convertible, and has limited availability outside of China. Using a less stable currency as a settlement currency for oil sales could harm the country's fiscal outlook and pose a risk to its overseas revenues tied to US bonds. China is the world's largest importer of crude oil. According to China's General Administration of Customs, Saudi Arabia was China's top crude oil supplier in 2021, exporting 1.76 million barrels of oil per day to China, which accounted for more than 25% of Saudi crude oil exports.
Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, they try to remain neutral. They try to remain in the gray area between those who impose sanctions on Russia, and of course the other side is Russia. However, that also has many economic reasons behind it. I don't think OPEC producers, they want to seem allies of the United States when it comes to how much oil they produce. And that's not only important for the relationship with Russia, it's also very important for the relationship with China. China imports around 45% of its energy needs from the Middle East.
Saudi Arabia has invited Chinese Chairman Xi Jinping to visit this year and plans to offer a warm welcome modeled on the treatment given to former US President Donald Trump when he visited the country. Beijing is naturally keen to see the negotiations with Saudi Arabia succeed, as it has been hoping to raise the international status of RMB to achieve a counterweight to the US dollar and the US. The joint Western sanctions against Russia have shown the Chinese Communist Party that being excluded from the dollar settlement system would be economically devastating. The use of the US dollar has become increasingly risky for the Chinese. Beijing also faces international isolation and possible economic sanctions due to its reluctance to condemn and sanction Russia. For the US, even if the Communist Party and Saudi Arabia succeed in their negotiations, the current impact would be minimal and unlikely to pose any real threat to the US dollar, since the RMB isn't a stable and reliable international currency that is freely convertible. In the long run, however, it's a red flag. The global commodity market, including oil, is the cornerstone for the dollar to maintain its global status as a reserve currency. If Saudi Arabia opens the precedent of trading in RMB, then other oil exporters such as Russia, Iraq, and Angola in Africa may follow suit, which would be tantamount to rocking the foundations of the dollar. Washington, meanwhile, won't want to see a deal between Beijing and Saudi Arabia. What it would do is yet to be seen. Now, let's look at Putin's third measure, which is to see gold as a substitute for the American dollar. Unlike currency, gold is an untraceable store of value, and there is no counterparty to gold transactions. On March 9th, Putin suspended a 20% value-added tax on precious metals, a move aimed at encouraging Russian people to purchase gold instead of foreign currencies when the ruble collapses. Russia's central bank had said on March 15th that it would suspend gold purchases from banks as of immediate effect to meet growing household demand for the precious metal. A report by Sberbank, Russia's largest state-owned commercial bank, showed that demand for gold by Russian citizens quadrupled in the first 2 weeks of March. Large purchases of gold were rendered impossible because the US has frozen part of the Russian gold reserves and restricted countries from buying Russian gold. What Putin did is to opt for small amounts of purchases and hide the wealth in the people. If the big Russian banks could absorb ruble funds and succeed in selling gold to the Russian public in pieces, they would partially offset the US sanctions against gold sales. By March 25th, the Russian central bank announced that it would buy gold from banks at a fixed price from March 28th. It would pay 5,000 rubles for each gram of gold between March 28th and June 30th. What does this mean? According to the current price of gold on the market, 1 gram of gold is equivalent to about 63 US dollars. The price at the Central Bank of Russia is 1 gram of gold, 5,000 rubles. After conversion, it's equivalent to 1 US dollar equals about 80 rubles. If European countries need Russian energy and food, and if they don't want to pay directly in rubles, they can also pay in gold. This would both support the ruble exchange rate and accelerate the de-dollarization. The Russian central bank has been buying gold every month since March 2015. According to Bloomberg, over the past 5 years, Russia has spent more than 40 billion US dollars to build a war chest of gold, making it the world's biggest buyer. And the real significance of this move in the eyes of the financial community goes beyond that. For more than half a century, the dollar has maintained its position as the world's #1 reserve currency and world currency. Now Russia is using its own energy sources to back its currency and set the price of gold. Once the countries concerned have to resort to gold as a means of payment for the purchase of Russian gas, China, India, and other major gold-producing and reserve countries will follow suit and peg their currencies to gold to some degree. It won't be enough to destroy the American dollar's hegemony, but will likely rock the dollar's global monetary establishment. There are now almost 6 months until another winter in Europe and 18 months until a second winter. It's almost like a deadline. The outcome depends on the state of contention and balance between the US, Europe, and Russia and other relevant countries during this period. Take Germany for example. People are snapping up wood and coal even as the cold weather months are over, with an eye on climbing gas prices and uncertainties about the effects of a prolonged war in Ukraine. Normally, the heating season ends now, and because it's very uncertain what will happen with the gas, many are already stocking up for next year. And it's of course very difficult at the moment to access this high amount. In the next 18 months, humanity may be facing the greatest risk since World War II, and the world order may change dramatically. Putin predicts the demise of the dollar and the euro, with everyone turning to real raw material reserves such as land, food, and gold. This may be his wishful thinking, but imagine if such a thing really happens, with gold, land, food, and fresh water becoming the most scarce materials and property in the world, then whether it's the dollar, the ruble, the euro, or the RMB, it matters very little. Then what will the world become? We hold the view that the communist ideology and system of the CCP is the most damaging factor for humanity and the world today. It needs to be treated with care and caution by all people of goodwill. It's regrettable that Russia, with all its different values from the CCP, has been pushed into its arms. If influential politicians around the world could only think in this light, the global landscape today and in the future may be completely different.